This is The Law Show on CL 650. Now back to the show.
Hey, Dwayne always surprises us. Hey, Steely Dan, how long did it take you to look that up? School days. We're talking about school trips. This is The Law Show. I'm Zach Spencer on CL 650. Joe Murphy, QC, is a lawyer and partner at Murphy Batista in downtown Vancouver. And Jeff Neuenberg, also a lawyer at the firm, is with us today. And we've talked about, sending children on school trips and the consent form that comes. So what's your advice to a parent who wants to send their child on the trip and signs that form? What are they signing away, really, and does it really matter?
Yeah, Zach, I commonly get phone calls from friends and say, we've got this form, should we sign it? And I always say, yeah, go ahead and sign it. It doesn't have any legal effect if something bad happens and the child is injured. Because the parent doesn't have the authority. And that's a surprise to most parents. They think, well, I'm the parent, I have the authority because I'm asked to sign all sorts of things. And the reality is, as a parent, you can consent to something, but you can't release anything for this child. And in BC, a child is anyone under the age of 19. Okay. So go ahead and sign it. Now,
Jeff, does that apply to not only school trips but any activity?
Yeah, so it applies to other activities as well. I've seen it before with minor sports and that sort of thing, with hockey and that sort of thing. Sometimes parents are given the forms to say, we're not going to go after Hockey Canada or whatever, but that doesn't have legal effect with minors.
Mm-hmm. So maybe the parents might be signing something away, and they can legally do that, but not for the child.
Correct. The parent can sign for themselves, but they don't have the legal authority to sign a release for the child.
Okay. My kids are involved in soccer, flag football, and we're always going to practices and to games. And what is the legal liability for me doing the carpooling? Because nobody wants to drive there and back 3 times a week. So you share the load with the other parents and you take 2 or 3 or sometimes more children to hockey practice or soccer, what have you. So what is your responsibility as a parent with those children, and what's your child's rights when they're with another parent?
Well, Zach, the law in BC says that the owner of a vehicle is liable for the negligence of the person driving if they have the owner's consent or if they live in the same household. So if I have a 7-person minivan and I loan it to one of the parents saying, listen, I'm busy today, but here, take my van and you can drive six kids to soccer or whatever it is.
Or a school trip, yeah.
Yeah. If there's an accident and if they're hurt, they're going to sue. These 6 kids are going to sue the driver, and they're going to sue me as the owner, and I'm liable for the negligence of the driver. Most people, I think the smart people have $5 million in third-party liability coverage. It's the most you can buy in dealing with the auto insurers, and you have to make sure that that's going to be enough to pay for the claims arising out of an accident. But when you're carrying 6 kids in a vehicle, the risk of them being hurt and making a claim is 6 times whatever the claim ends up costing. So there's a risk that you don't have enough insurance coverage. But even, as I say, even if you've loaned your vehicle to someone, you're liable. And another example is you loan your vehicle to your 16 or 17-year-old. They've got an L or an N, which means they can't load up the vehicle with all sorts of other kids, but they oftentimes do. And there was a case out in Fraser Valley a few years ago where there was a terrible accident that happened over lunch hour, kids from this one school, and there was a memorial set up. Kids were either badly hurt or killed. And then 3 or 4 months later, the same thing happened, the same school, same group of kids, not in the same place. But again, they loaded it up. So you, as the owner, would be liable. If you're the registered owner of the vehicle, you're liable if your child takes the vehicle out and causes a bad accident. Mm-hmm. So the more people you put in a vehicle, the bigger the risk is that your insurance may not be enough.
So in your expert experience, is $5 million enough? Have you had to go over the $5 million and then take a personal liability?
You can buy riders usually through your homeowner policy that will give you more than the $5 million.
But is the $5 million, say your ICBC insurance, for example, you buy that $5 million. Have you had cases where all of the $5 million has been eaten up and more?
We've done a number of cases where the amount involved was far in excess of $5 million. We've done $6 million, $7 million, $8 million, $7.5 million.
So
these are people badly, badly hurt.
Right. So then they come after your personal property then.
They could. Oftentimes in these bad accidents, there's fault on more than one driver. I did a case of a woman injured by a transport truck, and of course then there's a large commercial policy. So there's often different policies involved, and the more policies you get, the bigger the pool of insurance money available, because no one wants to find out they don't have enough insurance and there's a judgment registered against their house, the bank account is garnished. Those are things nobody wants to have to deal with.
So back to the initial point here of your child is going to be going with a carpool to a school event or to hockey or soccer practice, and you let your child drive with the other person, and they drive in a negligent manner. So all you really have at that point is the insurance to cover. You can't do anything. You cannot, file a civil case against the way they were driving. Well,
the one thing that I should add to what I said earlier is in BC you can buy what's called underinsured motorist protection.
Right.
It's to cover you and your family in the event you're hurt as a passenger or pedestrian and there isn't enough insurance money.
Do you recommend people take that? Because I get that every time I get my insurance renewed.
The basic ICBC policy has this it's called, and it's $1 million, which is the total pool of all insurance monies. For about $25 a year, you can buy a second million so that you and your family are covered up to $2 million. And again, through a homeowner policy, you can usually increase that from $2 million to $5 million. And that's a very good idea. It's very inexpensive. And if something bad happens, it turns out to be the best money the parents ever spent.
So when that insurance, when you're at the auto plan desk there and they say, do you want to take this for the $25? Your advice is what?
Definitely take it.
Take it.
I think you might have to ask them about it, because I don't know if all brokers actually are well aware.
They pretty much ask, because you have to initial that they've asked you.
Yeah, I know they tell you about the basic but I don't know if they always offer you the more
extended one.
It takes a while to explain it to people, and the commission I think is 15%. So if it's $25, they're making $3.75. And I've had. I bought a new car, and I had the dealership call the mobile insurance agent, and she came by, very efficient, and had me initial all sorts of boxes on stuff that we didn't discuss.
Yeah.
But I knew what the coverage is, and I had it. But if you have this additional coverage for yourself and your family, that minimizes or avoids the risk that there's an accident and there's not enough insurance.
Even when they're in somebody else's vehicle?
That's when it does cover them. It doesn't cover them in your own vehicle. It covers them when they're in someone else's vehicle.
And you're saying it's a pedestrian or a cyclist as well?
Yes. Anywhere in North America.
Really?
It's great coverage. It's so useful and valuable, and it's only $25 a year for the second million with ICBC. And it's not much more to go to your homeowner insurer and have that $2 million bumped up to a higher number.
So do we live in a society where we're so paranoid that we're insured too much? I mean, are people overpaying for insurance? Is there such a thing?
I don't think you can have too much insurance. The problem people have is when they find they have too little insurance. That's the problem. If you have too much insurance, it means you've paid a premium and you haven't claimed on it. But the example I give you is life insurance. The best thing that happens to a person with a life insurance policy is they're still alive at the end of the year. And they happily pay for the next year and then the next year. So it's there to provide protection if something bad happens. And the fortunate people are the ones who never make a claim because nothing bad ever happens to them.
Yeah, that's true. You're paying for, that's why it's called insurance, you know.
You're paying for the peace of mind.
Yeah. And is there anything else that you can do to cover your family in these instances where your children are away on a school trip or they're with somebody else in their care when they're driving? Is there something else that you can recommend?
Well, just be aware of what the plan for the trip is, and the starting point is going from the school to wherever the trip is and back. How is that transportation? What's going to happen? And if it's parent drivers, is there any screening done to make sure the drivers are experienced and are properly insured?
Okay, let's flip this around. I go as a parent volunteer to supervise a child. Am I at all legally bound to watch these children? Can anything come back on me as a supervisor? Is it the school that's taking the liability, or is there any personal liability as a supervisor?
I think it's both. Both the school would be liable and potentially the parents liable if they don't do a proper job. Mm-hmm. But believe it or not, your homeowner policy would cover that if you had a claim. So if you're one of the parents that takes a group of kids and you go to the beach, yep, and one of the kids drowns because instead of watching the kids, you'd wandered up to get an ice cream cone, your homeowner policy would provide a lawyer and would provide coverage if you were sued for not watching these kids properly.
Do all homeowner policies have this sort of protection, or do you have to ask?
No, it has. It's the basic homeowner policy provides liability coverage that essentially covers everything except operating a motor vehicle and working. So other than that, it's wide open. If I run into someone on a ski hill because I'm not watching where I'm going and hurt them, my homeowner policy will provide coverage if they sue me. It doesn't have to be at your house. It doesn't have to be in the same city or province. It's really this wonderful coverage, which makes that so important to have a homeowner policy, or if you're just renting, have a tenant's policy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I've heard, speaking with my insurance broker, that if you're underinsured, meaning that if the value of your house in Vancouver, we'll pick $1 million, that seems to be the number everybody likes to talk about, and you underinsure the value of the home, meaning the cost to replace it if there was a catastrophic fire, what have you, if it isn't within a certain ratio, you're not covered. Is that true?
Yeah, and what they want to do is they want to avoid someone buying minimal coverage saying, well, listen, the chance of the claim being more than $100,000 is minimal, so why should I buy $1 million worth of insurance? I'll just buy $100,000. And they have in the standard policy what's called a co-insurance clause, which means unless you're insured up to 80% of the actual value, we're going to pare back on the payments we make to you in the event of a claim.
Excuse me, but you know that when the insurance policy comes in every year, you just roll it over. Is this something that you should be getting somebody to assess your home and making sure that you're covered to a certain extent? Because you don't want to fall, you don't want to be 75%.
Okay, but the key is it's not the value of the land that you're insuring, it's the value of the building. And while the Vancouver real estate prices are going way, way, way up, it's not the building that's going up, it's the land that's going up. So you don't have to worry about covering the increased value of the land. It's just the house you're insuring, the contents you're insuring, and of course with that policy comes great liability coverage.
All right, when we come back on The Law Show, we're going to continue our discussion around, obviously, insurance and school trips, sending children on school trips. Joe Murphy is our guest here. He's a lawyer at Murphy Battista, along with Jeff Neuenberg, also an attorney at Murphy Battista in downtown Vancouver. We'll continue our conversation next on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.